who am I? My name's Hans. I'm a software engineer, Ruby on Rails engineer. Been doing this since about 2018. I'm based in Vienna, Austria, where I currently work as like a freelance, kind of independent contractor thingy. There's some socials. I also organize the Vienna RB Ruby meetup in Vienna, which is nice. I'm a professional, I consider myself a professional software engineer, not a professional cook. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about food. I like cooking, like as a hobby. After a hard day of coding and sit in front of a computer all day, it feels really nice to go to a kitchen and prepare something real with your hands. You get to chop veggies and do some, and then you make something real and you get to enjoy it, like literally taste the fruits of your labor, and that's nice. But I've been doing a bit more cooking recently, and I've come to realize it's ironic because cooking and software engineering is maybe not as different as I thought. And what do I mean? Okay, let's take the super high level overview. How do we build software? It's super simple, right? We have an idea, we want to build something, new feature, new product, whatever, and then we build it. Easy, right? We know that's not actually that hard, and then we profit. Amazing. And cooking is the same. We are hungry, we want to eat something. We have an idea for a recipe maybe, and then we cook, and the cooking, that's hardly worth mentioning. We just do it, and then we get to enjoy, right? Of course, we all know that's not true. Sadly, that's not true. The execution's not so simple. Maybe in the future, right? Maybe in the future we have computers to do anything. Matt said, maybe in the future the AI can do wonderful things. Maybe in the future we have meta replicators like in Star Trek, and we can say like, computer, one Kaiserschmarrn bitte. And the computer, and that there's just Kaiserschmarrn. If you don't know Kaiserschmarrn, by the way, it's an Austrian dish, a dessert that we more often than not eat as a main course. Just Austrian things. Who's had this, by the way? Who's been to Austria, and did you enjoy it? Yes. Yeah, it's good, right? I really like it. So I could talk about Kaiserschmarrn all day. We're here to talk about software engineering, building things actually. So the point is, we can't have computers do our cooking, right? That's not how it works. We still need to apply manual labor. We need to do things ourselves, and doing things ourselves involves actual skill, experience, knowledge. It involves us actually knowing how to do certain things. And in software, right now, it's still that way, right? LLMs, they make things a lot easier sometimes, yeah. But we are not there yet where LLMs or AIs can do everything for us. We still need to do stuff ourselves. And that's not as easy. Again, that involves skill, that involves experience, that involves knowledge. And building things requires a vast array of skills, different skills, actual knowledge of the programming language, and there's a tiny thingy that I actually want to focus on, and that is the skill to know how and when to break apart things, break apart large features into smaller, manageable chunks. Why does that matter? Why do you want to break apart things? It's because even though software engineering is like young as far as professions go, like a mere 60 years or so, we've learned, I think one thing definitely is that managing large chunks of work is like disproportionately hard. It's much easier to do smaller bits of work, and it's what Agile and Shape Up, like this is a slide from a picture out of Shape Up, is what this is all about. It's like taking a big thing, cutting it up into smaller chunks, and then iteratively working on those things, right? We know now that making many small changes is faster than making one big change slowly. But that ultimately means we don't start with small changes usually. We start with larger ideas. We start with the idea of, I want my Kaiserschmarrn right now. We start with the idea, I want to build this feature. That's where we start. So how do we get from the big idea to the small chunks? And that's really what this talk is about. This talk is about taking that idea, identifying our ingredients they want to put into our beautiful feature soup, Building a recipe if you want, identifying the concrete steps that we need to execute to arrive at our final product, right? And yes, as in cooking, in software, again, I want to emphasize that that's a skill. If you screw up your cooking, your meal's going to taste bad. If you screw up your software engineering, your building, your product might suck. And yeah, ideas matter. I don't want to underrate it. Like, ideas are important, but call me old school, I still think execution matters. So, okay. One little thing. How many ways are there to cut potatoes? It's a potato. How many ways could there be to actually like cut it apart? It's more than you might think. Some examples. Top left, that's what they actually call a Julienne cut, the French. It's like when you cut stuff into sticks. You don't call it stick cut, it's Julienne, okay? We have the crinkle cut, the potato wedges. You've probably seen this. There's waffle cut, still familiar. Then the middle one, that's a tournée, I think. Or fondant is the next one. And then we get into funky territory, like a Hasselback. I want to try that someday, it looks real good. Parisian scooped. If you have a lot of time in your hands, I guess you can cut your potatoes into smaller potato balls. And these aren't actually mushrooms. They're just potatoes cut to look like mushrooms. Probably tastes the same, but yeah, if maybe you have an afternoon and you're like, I don't know what to do with myself, I'm just gonna cut my potatoes to look like mushrooms. There's lots of ways to cut potatoes. That's kind of my point. Okay, there's lots of ways you can cut apart features. There's lots of ways to build things. What I'm talking about today, that's like my experience. That's how I like to do things, how I think about building software, how I think about breaking things apart, and your experience might differ. You might do things wholly different, and that's fine. What I'm kind of hoping for is, okay, maybe you get some new ideas, maybe you get some inspiration, and you come out of this with, yeah, just some fresh ideas on, hey, I could think about it this way. Maybe it's different. Okay, so talk about building. We need to build something. Let's build a small piece of software. What are we gonna build? Well, we're in the cooking context, so let's say I'm a restaurant owner. I'm a restaurant owner and also a business person. By the way, who knows this guy? Who's seen the show? Yeah, cool. So I'm a restaurant owner and a very stressed out cook. And as a business owner and a cook, it's important to me that I know what I sell. I want to know what dishes make it out the door, what customers order, how much profit I make of that, right? Because again, I'm a businessman, I like to make money. I just need some sort of reporting software, and I could buy some restaurant reporting software off the shelf, but no. I'm gonna build it myself. I'm also a Rails developer, okay? I'm not gonna buy shit. I'm not gonna buy anything. I know Rails, so I'm gonna build it myself. As we saw, how hard could it really be? Something simple. We've all seen something like that, or maybe even who's built reporting software? Yeah, okay. Always the same. You have some graphs, right? Let's say we have like a nice stacked bar chart. We want to see for each day how many dishes of each variety get sold. And maybe we hover and we see the details. And that's kind of the core of it. But I also want to filter based on time period. I want to see how much I sold last month, how much I sold last week, and so on and so forth. Maybe I want categories. Categories are nice. I want to see how much of dessert I sold versus how many vegetarian dishes I sold, right? And to top it off, actually numbers, like the total amount of dishes sold, that's nice, but I care about money. So what I really care about is actually the profit. So a nice little toggle like on the top left where I can balance total count of sold items versus change the graph to show me the actual profit. So how would you build this? If your boss came to you today, right now, and they're like, hey, please, I need this reporting software built. How do you build it? Take a minute, maybe think about it real quick. What do you start with? Do you just deliver it in one chunk? If you do smaller chunks, how much? Maybe cue elevator music? We take a minute to think about it. Yeah. Maybe your mind is like wondering, you're already thinking about the implementation. Oh, I'm gonna use this graphing library. It's gonna be beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So what did we come up with? Maybe you came up with something like this, a list of to-dos, and you think about, okay, you know what? One piece of this whole feature is actually the graph, right? I want to build things. I want to build a graph that groups by days, or like by months, or by tags. It should support all this. That's like one area, the graph, right? And then there's another thing, like there was this filtering. That obviously that's a chunk, all kinds of filter. That's a piece of work that I care about. And then lastly, there's this like type. That's kind of distinct. I want to change how the graph behaves in a way. Maybe you came up with something like this, but maybe you thought about it differently, right? Maybe you arrived at something like that. We're developers, we're engineers, we know there's database stuff involved. I'm going to need to do some things on the database side of things. I'm going to work with some models. I'm going to need queries for grouping by various periods. I need some queries for filtering. That's kind of the database side of things. I know there's going to be some controllers to wire up views to the models, and they need to handle parameters, handle requests, and so on. And lastly, yeah, there's the UI stuff. But what does that mean? The UI consists of a graph, and within the graph, there's like various forms for the dates, for the filters. There's a toggle, the popover, right? So, what the heck? Like, there's one feature, but there's really two distinct ways to think about it, or even more. Maybe you arrived at some chunks like this. Maybe you arrived at something completely different. It's completely possible. What happened when you take a step back and observe yourself, right? You looked at this and you identified some patterns and identified chunks, but what were those chunks? What criteria did you actually use to maybe subconsciously group this large thing into smaller little things? I think there's two main ways you can approach this or systematically identify what's going on here. I think any feature you could approach with like horizontal cuts. It's where you say this from an implementation perspective, from a technical perspective. This feature consists of layers in, let's say, the model view controller. Paradigm architecture, right? And there's some work that I need to do in the model, there's some work I need to do in the controller, there's some work I need to do in the UI. And I group my work items based on these layers, right? If I do that, necessarily my, let's say, PRs or my work packages, they look something like this. I could say, I'm gonna implement all the model stuff. On the left-hand side, I say, I'm gonna build all the database queries that I need for this entire feature, and I do it in one go, as example, and implement all the queries that I need, that I could possibly need as a start. Could do that, right? And I could say my next work item, my next chunk of work would just be the controller. I focus on the controller, on this little horizontal layer. I'm gonna implement all the controller stuff. Now necessarily that means if you start with the model, you don't have a UI to actually interact with that kind of stuff. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Let's put a pin in that. We'll see later. There's another way, right? I like to call this the vertical cut, and it's different. It's where we don't look at the implementation, at the technical side of things so much as we approach it from a feature perspective, and we identify which functionality from a fundamental functional point of view belongs together. And that could be the grouping, that could be literally the graph. We can say, okay, this rendering of information, just reading the information, the graph, this grouping of how many pieces of food I sold, that's clearly one thing. I'm gonna ignore the filtering, I'm gonna ignore this categories thing, I'm gonna ignore this type toggle thingy. I don't care about that. Just gonna focus on this, and this is a work item, making this graph happen, and I'm gonna do everything through all these layers to make this a reality. And then necessarily a work item, let's call it your PR, it looks like this, right? You have some view stuff, you're gonna implement a bit on the view side of things, you're gonna implement a small piece of functionality on the controller and a small piece of functionality on the model, on the database side of things. And again, just the things that you need to make this little slice of functionality happen. Are those the only ways to slice things? No, like why not both? You can combine those things. If your feature's large enough, and in practice most likely will do that, like gonna say like, okay, I have a vertical cut, but actually I need to break this down further. We love recursion, right? We're programmers, so we're gonna do the vertical cut, and then we're gonna do a horizontal cut, and then we're gonna do vertical cut and horizontal, and we keep going until we have tiny little chunks. You can do that. Sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes not so much, and we're gonna see more details on how that works. So, kind of danced around the question. Maybe you ask yourself, that's cool, we have vertical cuts, we have horizontal cuts, but how do I actually, how did that guys know that this graph thing, that's a chunk, why not a bit of graph and a bit of filtering? Why isn't that a cohesive item? How do you identify a cohesive thing? And for me, I don't have an answer. I think that that's pattern matching. That's a fundamentally human thing, intuition, where we make sense of our world through experience, right? We match past experiences onto new things that on new things that we experience. And I have a 1-year-old at home, and I can watch him do this all day. Like, new thing, he's 1 year old, he's never seen this before, but he's like, this looks like food. Sometimes he's right, sometimes he isn't. And then on the other hand, he's like, this is green. I've seen green stuff, I've tasted green stuff, I don't like this. And that's pattern matching for you. And we all do this, and we do it here as well, right? We look at a feature and we see, based on our experiences, some cohesive units. This is intuition. I'm not a psychology major or anything. I don't have an answer on how that precisely works. It's just, again, my experience. So I can't give you a clear guideline on, look, like obviously this little chunk is a cohesive item. This is obviously what you need to group together. I can't give you that. What I can give you is some, let's say, rules, maybe? No, rules is too hard. Ideas or my experiences on when you might want to apply certain kinds of cuts and what to watch out for if you do those, yeah? In practice, we haven't touched on a lot of things. Okay, you arrive at some vertical cut or horizontal cut, but that's like half the story. It's like different things matter. How big are those cuts, right? The order is also important in cooking, right? You might have your ingredients, but how you prepare individual ingredients and how you put them in, that matters. You're not going to start with your spices. Like, good luck taking a bunch of spices and dumping them into your pan, and yeah, that's going to taste great. Usually you don't do that, and in software development we don't do it either. So what do I watch out for when I start slicing and dicing? Value first. I think that's the most important thing. That's kind of my North Star, whatever, guiding light when I decide to break apart things, is when you ask yourself what is actually most valuable to the customer. And the customer can be yourself, can be somebody else. And we want to usually provide value to them quickly, right? So we focus on delivering that value first. And we focus on creating a slice, and most likely that will be a vertical slice, could be a horizontal slice. Usually you get a new feature, and there's always the nice to haves. There's like, this would be cool, and this. But if you look closely, there's usually like a core of the feature thing that really solves the problem at hand that kind of triggered this whole request. That's what you want to identify. And then focus on that. Get that vertical slice that solves this problem and deliver that. Again, and usually that's going to be a vertical slice. Might be a super technical problem, so it could also be a horizontal slice, but yeah. The trouble with that is, in my experience, that's also easy to get wrong. Who remembers this Goldie? Like, who's seen this before? What? Just one person? You can't tell me that's true. No, okay, let's like, okay, yeah. But still, okay, it's from like when Agile was still cool, like maybe 2011-ish to 10. So the idea is, it's meant to illustrate how Agile development is supposed to work, right? The customer wants a car, and we want to provide value to them continuously while we do iterations, right? We do sprints or whatever. So bad way to do things. First we build one tire, then we build two tires, then we build the hull, carrosserie, whatever. Then they have a car. And while we give them tires, they're not going to do anything with a tire because they want the mode of transportation. So first we build them a skateboard. And then we build them a little scooter and this bicycle, and they get fast every time, so the customer's happy. Nice, but there's an assumption buried here. And the assumption is the customer wants a faster mode of transportation. You made that assumption, so now you build something and deliver, so to speak, vertical slices here that you think provide value. What if the customer didn't want that? What if your customer wants to go to IKEA and get some new stuff, get a new Pax custom or whatever and ship it home? Is a skateboard gonna help them? Like, good luck. Maybe they want to go on a trip with some friends. Good luck fitting 4 people on a skateboard. Yeah, it's not gonna provide value to them. Think of it this way, you go to Austria, you go to an Austrian restaurant and you order a beautiful Wiener Schnitzel. And that comes with a side of lemon, traditionally. And you sit there and your stomach's grumbling and the waiter comes out and they hand you a lemon because they practice iterative development. You're not gonna be happy about that, I think. So take care. Careful of what you assume the customer really wants and slicing like that. Another thing, usually we don't work alone. In kitchens, they don't, mostly. In software development, we don't either. In cooking, there's a system, the kitchen brigade. It's actually old. It's from started around 1920. It's this idea of you have roles in the kitchen. Each cook, there's different cooks and they specialize in different things. You have associate, it just makes sauces. Poissonnier makes fish dishes, focuses on fish, chicken, all kinds of things, bakeries, right? In software, we have a similar thing. Usually, people on a team that specialize. Maybe you have a front-end expert, a database expert, somebody that just specializes in, I don't know, Rails architecture, I don't know, right? And why that specialization in the kitchen, same as in software engineering, because you get to parallelize. If we make a dish in the kitchen, might need some sauce, might need some fish, might need some sides, right? So the 3 cooks can prepare those things separately, so it's faster, and then they put it together. And the individual skill also comes to play, because the saucier is gonna be just better at making sauces because that's what he does all day, or she does all day, right? And same is true in software engineering. We specialize, so we get better at our specialization and thus faster. But that parallelization comes with a downside. What if the poissonnier just screws up the fish? Then the whole dish is blocked. Can't make it out the door. You have some sauce and you have some sides, but no fish, and that's gonna suck. Customer's not gonna want that, so everybody waits. Software, same thing. And another thing is, what about integration? What about we have individual chunks that we isolated and we develop in isolation. Now it's time to put it together. Maybe we get something like this. Merge conflicts. We've seen that, and that's what happens when you slice and dice and try to put your individual slices together. Maybe it's pain. You gotta be careful. Here's a little war story. When you have this parallelization, in my experience, often this horizontal cut kind of comes to play, because say you need a new feature and we have a React front end, so there's a person that is the front end expert, so they get to do the UI stuff. And I'm kind of the back end kind of guy, so I built the APIs, I built the data models, and we work in isolation. And that's fun and good, and we do our thing in isolation and parallel, and it's great. And then the day comes where my colleague tries my API a couple days or maybe weeks later, while we've been happily hacking away at our slices, and he's like, that's garble, I can't work with that. Just doesn't work, doesn't satisfy the use case, I had something different in mind. And then we need to go back, right? I need to change some stuff he or she needs to change some stuff, and so it goes. And then what ends up happening is we lose all the efficiency, all the benefits that we imagined from parallelization, we lose because we have to go back and figure things out again. And the problem here is we didn't communicate. Yes, we have isolation through those slices, but we didn't think enough about how we put our chunks back together. So yeah, you can slice like that. Most of the time you really want to, again, for the obvious benefits, but be careful when integration time comes. Another thing, usually in today's software engineering, each little slice that you want to deliver, you make a new branch, you make a new PR, whatever, that comes with overhead. Yeah? Creating a new branch, not that much overhead, maybe creating a new PR, maybe a bit more, depending on how much write-up you do. But depending on the process, you might have to do more. Maybe you have to create new tickets. Maybe you have a separate QA person that needs to review each PR. Obviously, you're gonna need reviews from your colleagues. So if you slice a lot, right, and your chunks get smaller, and you end up committing opening hundreds of single-line PRs. I mean, nobody's doing that, but that's kind of the extreme. All this overhead starts eating into your efficiency. And again, you eliminate all the benefits that you got from cutting and parallelizing in the first place, right? Think about it this way. I love me a good veggie wok, right? Because I don't know how woks actually work, but somehow they manage to make the veggies at the same time they're through, but they're still super crunchy and tasty and just good. Now imagine you cut them just the perfect size and the wok is amazing. Try pureeing your freaking carrots and dumping that in. Is that gonna be good? You're gonna get soggy carrot mush in your wok? I don't know about that. So be careful, don't cut too large because again, you can't, if your slices are too large, cognitively it's gonna be tricky. If you cut too small, too much overhead, you're gonna suffer. One more thing, that's the thing in cooking, substitutions, right? We make our cooks make dishes, and customers might have special dietary needs. They might have allergies, right? Maybe they just don't want a certain piece of thing. So what cooks will do, substitutions. They will swap out one ingredient for another. If the customer is allergic to shellfish, yeah, they're not going to put shellfish in that. Maybe they put something else in it, or they leave it out altogether. And we can do, in software engineering, we can do something quite similar. You might call it stubbing or mocking, or yeah, just plain substitution. You can swap out part of your slice if you want. Again, think of it this way. You want to deliver value as quick as possible, and what is valuable. Let's go back to the example of our little graph. Let's say I do this vertical slice that we had, where I focus on just building the graph and everything that I need to render that. What if I found that actually building the graph is super difficult? I don't know. We've never heard of ChartKick or whatever. It's difficult. We don't want to touch the graph. It just takes too long, but we still want to provide value. So how can we do that? Well, we figure what the customer wants, again, is to see how many dishes of a certain category, of each type, they sold each day. And we don't need actually a graph for that. We could just as well build a good old-fashioned HTML table, right? Just display some numbers. It's not going to look that fancy, but it serves the purpose. So we have this vertical slice again, but we can take the UI and kind of swap it out, do something smaller, and that helps to get things done quick. And again, it also reduces cognitive overhead. It kind of makes your vertical slice a bit easier to manage. Are we on time, by the way? I feel like I'm super quick. Anyway, it's late, so. One last thing. In practice, we've probably all seen this situation where we have a thing. For me, it's usually tool chains. We need to swap out Webpack with something else. I've had that in the past, and it's like JavaScript toolchain. We can't, no way we can break this into smaller chunks. We need to open a 500 file PR. That's just how it is. No way around it. Now I'm gonna sound super harsh. Whenever I'm confronted with that opinion, or when I think of myself in the past having this, I don't think that's true. In my experience, if you face the situation of, I can't possibly break this up, here's a matter of a lack of experience and possibly creativity. You really have to sometimes try hard to find those seams, find those cut points where you say, like, actually, this is a small thing that I can break out. This is another small thing that I can break out. But if you try hard enough, even like a granite boulder that looks inseparable, you can't possibly break this apart. Kinda, when you start looking for the cracks, right, you can sometimes find them. And in the end, it's gonna be worth it, yeah? I can pretty much, based on my experience, I can pretty much assure you of that. So, even though it looks like no way I can break this up, try it, and you should be happy with it. And with that, I'll leave you already. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.